Welcome viewer. Today we will discuss about another solved computer application questions on on this computer hardware and networking. This is basically the for electrical 6th semester 640 by 4S this paper for West Bengal State Council of Technical Education syllabus. Uh, and these questions are also important from the perspective of GLET preparation, and also this may be beneficial for in this video. I will be discussing the questions in two parts, and I will try to elaborate or related concepts in detail, so that this is not only this much question, this 25 or 30 questions, but it will be equivalent to at least 100 questions. So let's start. For this, the first question is to plug a telephone line into a modem, connect dash connector is used. So the question is which connector we should use for to connect a modem, to connect a telephone line into the modem. So for that, let's see how it looks in the back side of the modem. So if we check the back side of the modem, there are two ports. One port we can see this has eight lines, or connector has 8 wire connection, and this is RJ45 port, and by looking into this we can understand very well. And this is for the connecting the phone, and this is called RJ11 modem port. This is telephone line is get connected to this phone line. Now this is in detail. I am showing that RJ45 and RJ11. RJ45 or RJ48 has 8 ports and 8 connecting wires, and it has 8 wires. And RJ11 has 6, but internally it uses only 4. Let's see the details. That RJ11 is the predecessor of RJ12. So RJ12 is latest, and the difference is RJ12 used 6 wires internally, while RJ11 used 4 internal conductor. Here it uses 4, but RJ12, the recent one, uses 6. Now already we have got the answer that this will be RJ11, because RJ11 is the name of the connector that connects the telephone line to the modem. But how it connects to the computer or the CPU backend? So you can see the CPU backend, this RJ45, from this RJ45 Ethernet port, one end goes to the modem and other end goes to the CPU. Let's see. This is the total connection. This is the splitter. This is the splitter. It splits the telephone connection into two. One is coming to the telephone line, and another is going to the modem. So this connection is RJ11 cable. This RJ11 cable, this side, this is 2-wire cable. This is going to the modem, and from the modem, this is RJ45. This Ethernet cable is going to the back end of the CPU. So this is RJ45 cable. Now this question is over, but so that for the sake of completeness of knowledge, so that we can answer many further questions related to this topic, we also should know what is COM1. So this is COM1 port. This port I have shown in the back side of the CPU. We can see such kind of port. This is for VGA monitor, and this is COM1 port. Earlier days, the printer or earlier old modems are connected using COM ports. This is also known as communication ports. Okay, now let's go to next question. So the question is, commonly system timer use dash IRQ. So first we should know what is IRQ, basic concept about IRQ. So let's read this. This is from Wikipedia. In a computer, an interrupt request, that is IRQ. IRQ is interrupt request, is a hardware signal sent to the processor that temporarily stops a running program and allow a special program. What is that a special program? An interrupt handler to run instead. Hardware interrupts are used to handle events such as receiving data from a modem or network card, that is NIC card, or key press event, or mouse movements. So all these are basically some kind of hardware event, and it interrupts the system, the processor. And what a processor does, one processor at a time can execute only any one program. So whatever it is executing currently, it halts the execution and service the interrupt using interrupt handler. So this is basically an interrupt request. and there are total 16 interrupt requests are IRQ0 to IRQ15, but some are fixed. Some IRQ numbers are fixed, some are changed for different purposes. So let's see the whole table. So in the table we can see this IRQ0, that is our question, is almost always used for system timer, and it cannot be changed. So we got our answer. This will be 0, IRQ0. Now also some other important IRQ we should know, because next time the question can be that what IRQ is used for keyboard controlling or key press events. So that is IRQ1. Similarly, some other important are RS232 serial port, that is COM2 port. Similarly, first RS232 port, serial port, COM1 port, parallel port. In the earlier slide, the pink color port was the parallel port. So IRQ6 is for floppy disk controller. For PS2 mouse, this is IRQ12. So these are some of the important. So you may pause here and copy this whole table, so that will be a good reference, and that will you will get many more questions on the similar area. Okay, next question. The LaserJet printer speeds are measured in what unit? LaserJet printer speed are measured in which unit? ppm, rpm, rps or lps? Now before going forward with the answer, let's know what are the different kind of printers available. So mainly in a broad category, printers are two kind of printers are there. One is called impact printer, another is non-impact printer. What is impact printer? Impact printer means whenever we are printing using that kind of printer, there is some drum system where the physically touch, some hammering or some touch is required, so that to print, to get the print on the paper. So in that category you get daisy wheel and dot matrix printer. Dot matrix printer, some of you may have seen in the old railway reservation counters or in older post office, etc. They are very much noisy and they take very high time to print, and the characters are kind of dotted. They are not very good looking. And in case of non-impact printer, it does not require any kind of such drum or impact, that is no physical touch of some hammering effect is not there. So in this category, this inkjet, thermal printer, laser printer all comes in this category. Inkjet printer is the most cheap printer, but cost effective, you say, per page printing, that is the laser printer, and it is most widely used nowadays because its output or performance is much better. Now let's see what is dot matrix printer. In dot matrix printer, the term dot matrix printer refers to the process of placing dots to form an image. This is basically forms the image of each character using dots. Its speed is usually 30 to 550 characters per second. So for case of dot matrix printer, the speed is measured in CPS, character per second, but our question is for LaserJet printer speed. So this is the cheapest and the most noisy printer and has a very low print quality. Dot matrix were first introduced by Centronics in 1970. So many questions is possible from this portion, and you can, after watching this slide, you can answer all of them, not only this question. Now let's come to the final answer to this question. So that is the speed. The speed of a printer determines how quickly it can print pages. Speed is measured in pages per minute, ppm. A higher speed results in faster output. So in case of laser printer, the speed is ppm, pages per minute. How many pages it can print in a minute? It is the unit of speed for a laser printer. So coming to the next question. For the hard drive, dash values are held in CMOS. What are the different values that are kept in CMOS? So before knowing the answer, which option is answer, we should know what is CMOS and how it works. So let's know. This is the CMOS. CMOS means complementary metal oxide semiconductor. It is a technology, that is this, we normally called it the clock, or sometimes called the bias clock or CMOS clock, RTC clock. This is CR2032. It is the name of the battery. It is a battery, 3-volt battery. clock battery. This is placed in the motherboard in this fashion. Now some details about this. This most CMOS, that is complementary metal oxide semiconductor chips. This is the battery and there is a related chip inside CMOS chip. The CMOS chip is basically a RAM that is non-volatile, that is volatile storage, and its size is around 64. It can store 64 kilobyte of data. The information stored in CMOS is absolutely necessary for the PC to function. CMOS data reflect your computer hardware configuration. If you add, remove, change any hardware like CD-ROM or hard disks, you may change the CMOS settings to reflect such changes. Otherwise, computer will not be able to access that piece of hardware. Now let's see then what is the difference with BIOS and CMOS. So BIOS, we know, that is basic input output system. So when the computer is turned on, the BIOS, that is stored in the computer's read-only memory. So BIOS is kept in ROM, that is sometimes it is in EEPROM, electrically erasable programmable ROM. The BIOS is stored, but the BIOS needs some configuration, and that configuration is variable, that may change. We may change the configuration because we may change the size of the hard disk, we may add another hard disk, we may add another RAM. So in that case the BIOS cannot be changed. BIOS need to be flashed using electrically erasable technique. So we cannot do that every when and then. So whenever we install extra hardware, so the settings need to be changed. So where from the settings are stored, that are stored in the CMOS chip, so that BIOS read from that CMOS chip that what are the current configuration for the different attached devices like hard disks and the CD-ROM, etc. So this microchip reads current time from the memory chip in the with the real-time clock. This real-time clock, it needs constant battery support, and that battery support is given provided by our CR2032 3-volt battery. So this is basically BIOS, that is ROM, read-only memory, and this is RTC, that is the clock. This is battery powered RAM, and this battery is coming from this CR2032, that is CMOS battery, and stores date, time, and other system setup values and all this. Now our finally answer. The answer is there. Information is stored in the CMOS. Floppy disks and hard disk drive type, CPU type and speed, RAM size, date and time, serial, parallel port information, plug and play information, power saving settings. So we see that these things, head, cylinder and sector, these are related to hard disks. The hard disk has different disks, cylinders, and on the cylinders with disk, in the disks there are sectors. So magnetic tape, magnetic hard disks are HDD. Those have all these features, and the values for these features are need to be stored in the CMOS. So answer will be this head, cylinder, and sector, or the values of this. Question is the size of head, cylinder. A COM port is a dashboard. So we already seen in the very first question that COM port is a COM port is a serial port, and this that I was talking about, the parallel pink color port in the back side of the our computer, that is a parallel port, and this COM port is a serial port. This one is a serial port, and these are PS2 port, that is the for mouse and keyboard. Nowadays USB is the universal port, and we can attach any USB compatible device through USB, but these are dedicated. PS2 port is for this, green one is for mouse, and the keyboard is for this one is purple is keyboard. Similarly, this is VGA port. VGA monitor is connected using this VGA port. Nowadays there are for high definition TV or projector, we use this HDMI port. So these are different. Similarly for hard disks or memory, there are eSATA ports, recent ports. Earlier there were ID ports, and this audio 3 kind of audio ports are there. Here we can see is for a speaker, for line in, microphone. These are the audio speaker, audio ports, audio connection. And similarly this one parallel is sometimes LPT1. This is for used for printer, and this is Ethernet port, RJ45. This we already know. This is basically RJ45 port. this port is for RJ45 connections are going to this port, and USB ports you all know. So, and this COM1 port, serial port, that is for dial-up model used to connect this through this. Already we have discussed this one. So here the answer is serial. Going to the next question. OSI stands for. So OSI stands for, let's see what is OSI model. So in the OSI model, this is the OSI model, and why this model is used. OSI model is used. First, OSI model is developed by ISO, the standardizing body, International Standards Organization, and so they standardize. What they standardize? The protocols, how one system or a one computer will connect or communicate with any other computer that was made by completely two different companies, maybe one IBM PC is contacting or communicating with an Mac or Apple PC. So how that is possible? If only there is some standard protocol used to communicate, how data will be interpreted, how a packet or a part of the data is to be interpreted, it is encoded and decoded in the same way, then only two different computers can communicate among themselves. So that standard protocol was defined by ISO, standard International Standard Organization, and they named these standards OSI. Now what they want, earlier TCP/IP model, that was kind of proprietary model developed by DARPA, US Defense Institute. So US Defense has during DARPA project in 1970s, they have developed this TCP/IP model, but that was only their model, so they are using. But when the throughout the internet or all the people started using, so for different countries we need a standard interface or standard protocol that all will use. So when something all can use, then the word open comes. So different systems can interconnect through some open standards. So now from this point you can get what will be the answer of OSI. That will be, if you cannot remember or if you don't remember, then also from the logic why it is used, we can get the full form. This is open system interconnection, because this protocol are used for interconnecting different computers. The computers are normally we call it as system, and this should be open, not proprietary, not fixed for a particular company. So it is open system interconnection, because other options are cannot, like operating system interface, no. Optical service implementation, not at all, no chance. So we can also, even if we don't know exactly OSI, the full form of OSI, but if we have idea about this OSI model, then we can answer this question. This will be open system interconnection. Now a single channel is shared by multiple signal by dash. So a single channel is shared by multiple signal. Then this is analog modulation or digital modulation or multiplexing. So before answering directly this question, I will try to discuss what is analog modulation, what is digital modulation, and what is multiplexing, and then I hope you will be able to answer this without my help. So let's see what is analog modulation. In case of analog modulation, there are three different type of analog modulation. One is basically, this is some signal, this is a message signal, this sinusoidal wave is a message signal, and any signal, basically this signal is actually written in terms of a equation. If we write as a equation Vt, then it will be basically some amplitude into that is some amplitude, we say Vm, that is the fixed value, maximum amplitude Vm, then sine of omega t or sine of t, we can write basically sine of theta, or we can write sine of omega t, plus, actually we write also one more thing, sine of omega t plus phi. So there are three components. Basically this component is the amplitude part, sorry, this omega is the frequency part, and this phi is the phase part. Any signal, any electrical signal has three components. So one is the amplitude part, another is the frequency part, another is the phi, that is the phase part. And during any analog modulation technique, we can actually, depending on the all these features are present for this carrier signal, and we can message we can join the message signal over the carrier signal, put the message signal over the carrier signal using any of the three techniques. Like we may modify the amplitude, we may modify the frequency, or we may modify the phase. So depending on that, it can be amplitude modulation or phase modulation or frequency modulation. So here we have shown the amplitude modulation, how this is done. This is the carrier signal. So carrier signal frequencies and amplitude both are different from the message. Now we add them, that is the message signal is placed over the carrier signal, so that this message signal changes the amplitude of the carrier signal. So now it becomes like this, because depending on this message signal amplitude is increasing. In that time the amplitude is increasing of the amplitude of the carrier signal increasing, again stop the lowering during the negative cycle, again increasing during the positive half. So the amplitude of the carrier frequency signal is impacted due to the overloading or due to mixing of the message signal with the carrier signal, then it is amplitude modulation. I have not shown here the frequency and phase modulation, but this is kind of an amplitude modulation technique. Analog, this is basically analog modulation, as this signal is an analog signal. Now see what happens in case of digital modulation. So similarly, three kind of digital modulation is there also. In case of digital signal, this is the digital signal, 1 then 0, then again 1 then 0, and the carrier signal is also same analog signal. Now what we want to place the digital signal over the carrier signal, and again due to the nature of the digital signal, this carrier signal properties or characteristics of the carrier signal will change. So there will be three kind. One is amplitude shift keying, frequency shift keying, and phase shift keying. We have shown that there are three properties of a signal that we can use to convey the signal. So in this case we see that amplitude is changing. During the time of 1, this is high, so amplitude is high. We see amplitude is high for of the carrier signal. Then during the time of 0, this is 0 amplitude, so we can see very minimal amplitude. Again high, again minimal. So from this we can identify the what was the digital signal, because when the amplitude is high, that was 1, then the amplitude is low, that is 0, again amplitude is high, 1, again low, 0. Now in case of frequency shift keying, we see that when 1, this signal become very high frequency signal, because these are very closely closely cycles are very close, so that means the frequency is high. Here frequencies are low frequency, again high frequency, low frequency. So high frequency means 1, low frequency means 0. So this is frequency shift keying. Then again phase shift, in case of, we can see this is going normally going 1, then from this point we see that instead of directly going up, it has changed its direction. Here it has changed its direction, 180-degree phase shift. So this become from 1 to 0. Again here you see it has not directly come down. Instead from this point it is again going up and then down. So there is again 180-degree phase shift. So from 1 to 0, 180-degree phase shift, 0 to 1, 180-degree phase shift. So using the phase we can modulate the carrier signal. So in this case this is digital modulation. But our question is on a single channel is shared by multiple signal. Nothing here, something that is not happening. Here one carrier signal is there and one message signal is there. Message signal is transmitted by placing the message signal over the carrier signal for long distance for long distance traveling, because this signal is baseband signal. Now let's see what is multiplexing. So this is multiplexing. So in case of multiplexing, you see that no multiplexing means all this computer is connected to this computer, one connection. Similarly, all are connected to one. Now if we can do something like this, all four are connected to some system, a multiplexer, actually it is called MUX, then there is only a single channel. Then in the end, other side, then there is again one demultiplexer, and from that four different computers are connected. So only single channel is connecting multiple systems. So this could be two type. One is frequency division multiplexing, another is time division multiplexing. In case of frequency division multiplexing, the same one channel, if the channel size is this much long, suppose this is the channel size total, so this channel is internally divided into smaller sub channels, and all the four signal travel through these sub channels. That is signal from this machine going to this, going through this, going through this. All signals are going simultaneously in the channel through multiple paths. Signals are going simultaneously through multiple paths. This is frequency. This port channel is divided based on the frequency. That is, the example is we divide the channel into based on frequencies. FM channels, the radio, there are many multiple FM channels, maybe 10 20 channels, but they differ by their frequency, carrier frequency. We say 91.9, so that has some different frequency. 92.3 FM, that has some different frequency. So but all are going through the channel. Here channel is the medium, is the air, so all are coming through the air, but they are multiplexed, that is they are having different frequency band. So this is frequency division multiplexing. Now another one is time division multiplexing. In that case, again there are four systems and there is one single channel, but in this case the channel is you divide by time. For the first time instance, we see that this system is using the channel. First D is going, then no sorry, the first A is going from this has used the channel. So only completely exclusively A has used. For that time they are not sending data. Then once the time slice or time quota of A is over, then B is using the channel with this data. Then C is using, then D is using. This is time division multiplexing. The same channel one by one is using. So this is what this kind of scenario happens when there is a bridge that can accommodate only one vehicle at a time. There are, in this side is wider road and four vehicle came, then other have to wait, one vehicle will go, then next vehicle will go. Similar kind of situation, that is time division. For the timing they are waiting, first one goes, then second one goes. This is time division multiplexing. So in this case we see that in both the cases the single channel is used by multiple signals. So that is, the single channel is shared by multiple signals. So this is multiplexing. There are two type of multiplexing. So now probably any more detailed question on multiplexing or analog or digital modulation you will be able to answer. So next question, the data link layer takes the packet from dash layer and encapsulates them into frames for transmission. So this means where from the data link layer gets the data, so that, and then it encapsulates with its header and then propagate to the next layer. So for answering this question we need to know the OSI layers, and the answer will be the layer that is situated just above the data link layer. Let's see OSI layer. So this is the OSI model, and here we see that this is the data link layer. So above the data link layer there is network layer. So data packet from the network layer come to the data link layer, then data link layer add a frame header, then rest part is has come from the upper portion, that is the network layer. Then the whole thing is called data frame, and it sends the whole thing to the physical layer, and then finally physical layer convert it into a 0 1 bits and transmit through the medium, maybe wireless medium or maybe wire medium. So the data link layer gets the data from the network layer, that is just above layer, above data link layer. And if we want to understand the whole process in the from application layer, this data has become in the next TCP or transport layer, it adds the segment header, and for it the data is, this part is data and this is the header, transport header. In the next section the whole complete this part becomes data for network layer. So what it does, it considers this as data, the whole thing is considered as data, but actual data is this, only this portion. But network layer again add its header, packet header, called packet header. So the transport layer adds segment header, network layer add packet header, segment header is also present. It is added extra packet header. Now data link layer will also again add the frame header. So now the when it reaches the physical layer, all these are overhead. This will be used when we will de-encapsulate the data during this process, the opposite process, de-encapsulation, because this frame header is added by data link layer, this packet header is there, segment header is there, this frame trailer. Then also there are some other things that are used in data link layer, second layer, that is the cyclic redundancy check, and many other error control techniques are there that are used in the physical layer also, so that if any bit got changed, that should be corrected, that could be corrected. So whenever actual data is this much, but as we go down, then many extra data is added, so that that data is correctly interpreted and de-encapsulated in the receiving end. This is the receiving end. So finally, if this data is basically nothing but a WhatsApp chat with hi, then this is basically nothing but two byte of data, h and I, 1 byte character. So but this high, the many data will be added with this high in the transport layer, network layer, data link layer, and physical layer. The size will be much higher than 2 byte. And again this side, the as one this reach this data link layer, it will remove this frame header and frame trailer, and then give the data to network layer. It will then remove the packet header, and then it will transport layer will remove the segment header, and finally the application layer will get the data that is high. This is how it works. So in this case the answer will be network layer, because the network layer is just above the data link layer. So data link layer gets the packet from network layer, and then it encapsulates them into frames, and then give it to the physical layer for further propagation. So next question. Now next question is related to that earlier one. The header of a frame generally contains what? So header of a frame, the frame we see that data link layer creates the frame. After it gets the data from the network layer, then it create a frame. That is, it add the frame header and frame trailer, etc. So what are the details that are present in the frame header? That will be answer here. So this is basically frame header. This part is header, this part is trailer. So in the header part, it adds basically these four things. One part is preamble part, then destination address, then source address, and then type, frame type. Now what is this preamble? In preamble size is 8 byte, and this we can see this is used for to synchronize the receiver and sender clock rate, because this is basically after this the physical layer is there. So both data link layer connected through one another, the sender side and the receiver side, they need to synchronize their clock, and that synchronization related data bits, data pattern are provided in the frame header, data frame header, and the preamble section. And other things what are there? Other things are the destination address, source address, and the type, that is frame identifier. So here the answer is not only synchronization bits, address, frame identifier. Basically there should be one more option, all of the above, and that should be the answer, because all of this all contains in the frame header. So the answer is all of the above. Now the next question. The 4 byte IP address consists of network address, host address, and or network or and host address. So before understanding this or answering this question, we first need to know what is 4 byte IP address. So IP is internet protocol. Let's see something. The IP addresses are 32 bits long, that is 4 byte. They consist of two parts. One part is called network number or net ID, another part is called host ID or host number. The 4 byte value or IP number, internet protocol number, displays each byte as a decimal number between 0 and 0 to 255, because 32 bit, so 8 bit, 8 bit, again 8 bit, again 8 bit. So 8 bit means 0, all 0 to 8, 0 to 81, that is up to 0 to 2 to the power 7 minus 1, that is 0 to 2 to the power 8 minus 1, 255, 2 to the power 8 minus 1, the value will be within this. So that is 0 to 255. So each value will be 0 to 255. We show it as a dotted decimal format, that is one dot in between them. So this is, for example, 192.100.75.123. This is an example of an 4-byte IP address. Recently 6-byte IP addresses are used, but for the time being we are considering IPv4, not IPv6. Each part is also called an octet of 8 bits. Because there are 8 bits, these are octet, 4 octets are there. The first octet defines the address class. So using this first octet, we may know what is the class, which class the network address belongs to. So for this part we also to know the answer. This is the 4-byte address consists of network address, host address, network and host address. You see, this is answer because it has network number as well as host number. Now we see some more details. This part is net ID. Now this is class A address. In this case, the first byte is the net ID, that is network ID, and rest 3 bytes are host ID. So that kind of addresses are class A address. For class B, first 2 bytes are net ID and last 2 bytes are host ID. In case of class C, first 3 are net ID and last one is host ID. For class D, these are multicast addresses, and class E are reserved. Now we see some more details, like in terms of values. For class A, the values up to 0 to 127, this belongs to class A, but all 0 and 127, these are actually special purpose. So there is 127.000, that is a local host address. So actually effectively 1 to 126, if the first octet is this within this value, then it is belonging to class A address. Similarly, up 128 to 191 belongs to class B. Similarly, class C is 192 to 223. Like this address is a class C address, that is starts with 192. Similarly, for class D, the first octet is between 224 to 239. So then it will be to a class D address. This is again the range, and we have seen that here we have called that the first octet defines the address of the class. So here it is the first octet. If the first value is 0, then it is class A. In the first 2 byte bits are 1 and 0, 1 0, that is this range. Then it is B. If it is 110, then C. If it is 1110, then D. If it is 41, then it is class C. So only seeing the first 4 bits of first octet. There are 8 bits. Among these 8 bits, only first 4 bit defines the class of the address. Now next question, 255.0.0.0 is subnet mask for dash group address. That is it asks for which class of address this is. 255.0.0.0 is a subnet mask. So what I have done, I have searched in my laptop. I have run ipconfig sorry, and these are the details I got. This is IPv4 address 192.168.43.29. So this is a class C, 192. And for class C, we see that subnet mask is 255, 255, 255, 0. Why? Because for a class C address, net ID is on first 3 octet are net ID. First 3 octet are net ID. These 3 are net ID. And the last one is only host ID. And what subnet mask do, it masks this net ID portion. So subnet mask will be for this 255, for this 255, for this 255, and net ID part will be 0. So this is for class C. If it is a class B address, then what will happen? There will be, in case of class B address, 2 net ID, 2 octet are net ID, and 2 octet are host ID. This is a class B. Class B. So here what will be the subnet mask? 255 net ID cover .0.0. This will be 0. This will be 0. This is dot. and these are 255, 255. In case of class A, what will be? For class A, net ID is only one octet is net ID, and 3 octet are, these 3 are host IDs. We need to only mask the net ID, so there will be only 1 255, and these 3 will be 0 0 0 0 in case of class A. So now actually we have the answer to the question, that subnet mask of 255.0.0.0, that is 255.0.0.0 is for class A, and for class B it will be 255.255.0.0. For class C it will be 255.255.255.0. So here I have shown the details, that is during, for this is a class A address, so default mask will be all 1, then only for net ID, this portion is net ID, net ID, and this is in case of class B 2 net ID, 2 octet are net ID. In case of class C 3 octet are net ID. So to this we need to mask this to net IDs. So the subnet mask will be 255, 255, 255, 0. In case of class A, it is 255.0.0.0. So not only this question, actually you should be able to answer any kind of subnet questions, subnet masking questions for class A or B or C. So going to next question. A dash is a TCP name for a transport service access point. So transport service access point is called port or pipe or node. So let's see. This is transport service, application layer, transport layer, all this we know. To access a specific service, we have to mention a specific port address. So for a transport service, access points are basically ports, and we need to tell the port address so that we can access a specific service. Now let's see some example so that we can remember all these things. Some of the network layer protocol that are particular, there are particular defined ports that use this service. Like for example, file transfer protocol, FTP. For the data part, port number 20 is used, and for the control part, 21 is used. Data is basically the file data. You are uploading the file, moving the file, and this 21 is for control. That is, we want to you are sending the signals, commands, read the file, remove the file, delete the file. These commands are the controlling commands. Similarly, for SSH, secure shell, port 22, for telnet port 23, these are very important. You should actually copy it in your notebook so that you can refer to it later. These are all very important. Like SMTP, simple mail transfer protocol, this is 20, port number 25. This is very normally it comes in question, not in this question, but it may come anytime. This telnet is 23, this is also important. Similarly, FTP is 20 and 21, these are important. SSH is 22, that is also important. Another very important is this 80 HTTP port. All the internet traffic, you are using the Chrome or any web browser, it actually send the request through port 80 and receive also through 80. So sometimes it is also called 8080, because this port 80 receives any HTTP request and also serves through this port 80. So this is HTTP. And another we should know, that is HTTPS, that is 443, that is secured HTTP with secure socket layer. So the data is, in case of HTTP, your data, username, password, all those travels are encrypted. In case of HTTPS, it is data are encrypted. So these are some of the ports or port IDs, or this we can say port addresses, that are used for different services, or it can be used as this access point. So the answer is basically port. This is the answer. The dash translate internet domain and host name to IP address. So the dash translate internet domain and host name to IP address. So internet, what is internet domain? Internet domain or host name, these are basically that google.com, yahoo.com, these are kind of internet domain or host name we can consider. And but internally one application server or their server has a particular IP address that actually browser needs when it want to communicate or want to connect to the server. But we provide the domain name in the browser. But how this browser actually get this IP address? So let's see the process. What actually happens? This is the browser, and first browser send this www.google.com or whatever.com to a DNS server. DNS means domain name server. So this is there is a mapping between each domain name and corresponding IP address. The IP address of the suppose this is for google.com, then the google.com has a particular IP address. So there is a mapping in the DNS server that if the request for google.com comes, then reply back with the IP address of that google.com. So this is basically the domain name. The browser first sends the domain name query to the DNS server, and the DNS server return the IP address. Then actual request for the web page or actual request to the web server goes, the browser sends to this IP address that is received from the DNS server to the web server. Then you see the google.com, the home page of Google, you can see. Now here we should know one more thing, that this domain name is sent, the browser sends the domain name to the DNS server and it receives this. Now browser, how do the browser know the DNS server? Where is the DNS server? So for that purpose, DNS server, for the DNS server, there is they also have some IP address. For example, we see sometimes default we add in the internet settings a default DNS as or alternate DNS as 8.8.48 as IP address for DNS. So from that settings, browser gets the DNS server address. There are some default DNS, and sometimes Google or some big companies place their own DNS server and they publish their IP addresses so that people can use these DNS addresses in their settings, and the request from this browser goes to that DNS server, and in return they get the IP address, and then the actual request is sent to this IP address, the web server presented this IP address, and the web page, requested web page, going to the browser. So this is actually happening inside when we type some google.com and press enter. This whole thing happens inside. So this DNS actually does this internet domain to host or host name to IP conversion. Now also we should look what is ARP and what is DHCP. Let's see what is ARP. ARP is basically known as Address Resolution Protocol. This is what it does. Basically, ARP is a protocol when some IP has come that has to be forwarded to a some data has come that has to be forwarded to a particular IP address, and this machine does not know, it need to communicate to this IP address, but it does not know which computer has this IP address. But it to communicate in a local area LAN, it needs the MAC address, but it does not have the MAC address of this IP address. So what it does, it basically send an ARP request, that is something like who has this IP address. Now it goes to all the computers, all the system present in that local area system, local area network, and only the system that has this IP address, like this system, same IP address, that only replies back. So it replies back with its MAC address or physical address. Now it has sent the MAC address. Now it stores the MAC address, the mapping from this IP address. So it know that if any packet from the router comes that is destined for this IP address, then that has to be sent to this MAC address, because inside the local area network, MAC address is the address that is used for communication. So IP to MAC conversion is done through ARP. Now what is DHCP? That is Dynamic Host Control Protocol. That is used to assign the IP addresses dynamically. Suppose if a DH server is installed in a local area network, then in that network, whenever a client means any system is connected to the system is turned on, then this server automatically assigns him an IP address. Where from it used from a pool of IP address. There is a database of IP address, and it assigns some IP address to this client. Again, another client came turned on, and again another IP address is assigned, so that it avoids the IP conflict. If manual configuration is used, it may happen that two client may have given same IP address. In that case, the communication, they both cannot communicate through internet or through the network, because if the same IP address is present for two hosts, that is the IP address conflict, then no packet will be received by them, or they will not be able to send any packet due to this IP address conflict. So this could be avoided using dynamic host control protocol and using this DHCP server. Another advantage is that if there are, suppose this is a class C address and it has only 255 hosts possible this inside this network, and there are maybe more than that 300 systems, but not all online at the same time. In such case, the normally the system or the network cannot assign an IP address to all 300 host, because maximum it can assign up to 255 IP addresses. But if it is a DHCP server or DHCP enabled system, then and at a time 255 system maximum gets online, then it can work well, all can get access, because all are not coming online at the same time. So at any time up to 255% gets the IP address working. Then whenever it is turning off, this any client turning off, the IP address goes to the IP address pool, and whenever another system comes, that IP address is being assigned to that new system. So in this way, using DHCP server, more than the 255 host could be serviced. That is one important advantage of using DHCP server. So let's stop for the time being, and in the part 2 we'll continue rest of the questions. Thank you.